Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Kindhinge, and my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
Oh, smell that delicious ball deodorizer scent. My balls are, it's like Christmas down between my legs.
Are we talking about the same movie? You talking about balls?
I'm talking about Manscaped's ball deodorizer.
Oh, you're really pushing you're like, I'm going to shill this shit.
You know, I always said, I'm like Neil Young. I don't sell out for anybody, man. And then as soon as Manscaped came along, I'm like, I'm a corporate whore.
I'm a corporate whore. You're just going to make all of the opening puns basically something dealing with Manscaped. I love it. This week, we're not talking about rope. We're not talking about balls. We're talking about
Alfred Hitchcock's balls, the 1948 classic.
Oh my God. It's going to be a fun episode.
They just whacked a man to death with their testicles. Teabagged him to death.
Oh, shit. We're on episode 308, and this week, continuing our month of Alfred Hitchcock, piece of shit, hope he's burning in hell, we're going to talk about one of his movies that is, I'd say this is one that not a whole bunch of people, like, jump to when talking specifically about Hitchcock, and that's 1948's Rope.
And Brian, well, first off, I think for all the intellectuals who've never listened to the show before and wanted to hear something about Rope, we just lost them. We just lost the NPR people.
We lost the NPR people. We lost the Inside the Actor Studio people. We lost TCM. All the TCM folks are gone. You know, any chance of ever landing, you know, a TCM job, it's gone now, John. We opened with balls sniffing and Rope and Alfred Hitchcock burning in hell. I don't think it's going to work for us.
Oh, shucks.
Shucks.
But the two main things that I want to discuss on this episode is that, number one, and I'm going to probably say B next, one and B, is that
one and then B,
is that this film was not appreciated in its time. This has become like a Hitch cult classic. And B,
Hitch cult, that's a great term.
But B, this film should be shown in every film class as a master study in long takes and how to break them seamlessly.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, it is a master class, and and I don't even want to give Hitchcock all that much credit. His cinematographer had to do the work. Hitchcock sitting on his fat ass like eating scones being like, keep the shot rolling.
Well, here's the thing. You know, if you listen to last week's episode on Rear Window, you know I have no love lost for Hitchcock.
Nor should you.
No, should I? So but I will give him credit because obviously, even though you've got the cinematographer who's doing a ton of the work here, and that would be Joseph Valentine and William Scull. I'm looking at it because I've got Wikipedia open. Obviously Hitchcock is directing where things are going. Right. Like he is the one who is the one saying, hey, move over here and go to this part here so I can hide a cut here. So there is some intentionality there on Hitchcock's part. But, it is something that, the Rear Window obviously was shot by Hitchcock. Hence why his male gaze was all over the place. Whereas this one, it is done by someone else. And I think you can kind of tell because it's clearly a movie that reads Hitchcock, but it doesn't visually read him as much as some of his other works.
And did this come off as kind of like a play to you? I mean,
this was a play. It's based off a play. Yeah. Yes, 100%. Absolutely felt like a play to me. Full disclosure, this was my first time seeing Rope. And the reason why we're covering it is because when we were talking about doing Hitchcock Month and John gave me a list of the movies we're going to cover, I was telling my wife, Lauren, about it, and she was like, oh, you got to do Rope. And Rope is one of my wife's favorite films, okay? Cinema Paradiso is their other one. Rope comes in at a very close second.
Ooh, so it's on her Mount Rushmore,
It's on her Mount Rushmore. So, when I was talking about doing Hitchcock Month, she's like, got to do Rope. And so I actually got to watch it with her, which I never get to watch the movies we cover with her because she hates all of them.
Well, usually we watch crap.
Yeah, we usually watch crap. And my wife has a very astute taste that she won't watch crap films, and I respect her for it. Me, I'll take any type of movie, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I don't care. But yeah, we got to watch Rope together, which was nice. And I watched it first by myself and fell asleep halfway through, and then watched it again together, and we got to watch the whole thing. And yeah, it totally reads like a play. And it's definitely a talkie. It's a
lot of
ton of talking. That's probably why it reads like a play, though.
From a very surprisingly nihilistic Jimmy Stewart. Well, there are people that shouldn't live as well as I do.
I've got some thoughts on the messaging in this film, and like we're going to talk about it later, because there's a lot to go over with this film. But there's a theme here that I think absolutely hits because of the time period this film came out in. And I'm curious your thoughts on it. But before we get to that, just to kind of give you a little background on this was based off of a play. And apparently the play was based off of a real murder. Did you know that?
Yep. It was The Perfect Murder by Nathan Leopold and Richard Loeb, who I saw a documentary on them many, many years ago, but I couldn't remember either of their names. Mm-hmm. So I did like the research for this episode to look them up, and I have like their names written on my computer right now because I didn't even remember right at this moment. But yeah, they went to do The Perfect Murder. They were like geniuses, like on an IQ scale, and like I don't know, it was like Harvard students, but they were well off, highly educated, highly intelligent, and they were also sociopathic. So they were like, well, let's fuck the system and let's commit the perfect murder, and we'll laugh our asses off for the rest of our lives because they'll never find out that we did it. But if you actually look into it, they made every fucking mistake you could possibly make, including one of the two, like leaving their bloody glasses behind that had a special prescription, and the police were like, went to the only optometrist in town and went, hey, how many people have this prescription? And they went, oh, here's like the 3, and oh, wouldn't you know it, one of the 3 knows the guy who was murdered. It's like, yeah, perfect murder my ass. But yeah, so it's based off of those two.
Yeah, but it's an interesting concept. So the movie itself, I mean, it's got a bunch of you mentioned it, it's long takes that are the things that are kind of technically hitting you over the head with this. There are very few cuts in this movie.
I think there's only like 5 or 6. Which...
There's more than that. I think there's 10.
Okay, there's 10.
So there's 5 or 6 that are hidden.
The editor had to be happy.
About another 5 that are, just actual legit straight cuts. So this movie, like what most people know about it, is just that it is one long take for the most part. And that's
pretty close, yeah. It reminds me of, like, say, modern contemporary film in the past 3 to 5 years, I can't remember when it came out, 1917.
Yeah.
Which there are, if you want to see, like, where the cuts are, there's YouTube videos that show you where they, like magicians, covered their cuts. Like there's one point where they walk into a very dark room and it's pitch black, and then they walk out of it. Like, that's an opportunity for a cut. And I'm sure there are videos I didn't check on where Hitchcock makes his cuts in this. But Brian, what I think is fascinating is that we watched this back to back with Rear Window.
Yeah.
And we had talked about how, we were almost the voyeur, not just on the murderer, but also Jimmy Stewart, in the way that he had his camera set up. And Hitchcock ran his camera in that one, and this one I don't know about you, but I felt like I was like the wallflower. The camera was me. I was the wallflower at the party that wasn't talking to anybody, and I was just listening and experiencing it, almost like a little kid at a party who feels they can't talk to the adults, who are just sitting there coloring in the corner and just listening to all these conversations. Like, the camera was us.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know how you agree with that.
And I mean, this movie, in the camera work especially, you had mentioned last episode about how Hitchcock really likes to play the audience like a piano. And the camera work in this and the editing in this plays the audience like a piano. Like from the start of the film to the end of the film, you're on the edge of your seat. And this is a movie that came out in 1948, and it still is able to, at least for me, at least being that this is the first time I watched it, was literally on the edge of my seat. And there's a scene in this movie where the maid, I think it's Mrs. Watkins or Wilson, Miss Wilson, is literally putting away a buffet that is on top of the chest that the dead body is in, that David is in, and the camera is just holding on her the whole time. And so, like, we hear the conversation happening with everyone else in the room, but we're holding on her. And we, the audience, know that that dead body is in there. And this maid is clearing off this dead body and is about to put these books that are supposed to go in the chest back in the chest. So literally you're just like, is that bitch going to open it up? And everyone's going to find out there's a dead body in there? And it holds on it for so long, just until the point where Brandon, psychopath number one, is able to come in and like say, hey,
true psychopath.
Hey, don't let me take care of that. So like it's absolutely playing the audience from start to finish, and like that particular scene like got me so hard. I was just like, whoa. And this is again a movie from 1948 that is able to do it.
Yeah.
But
and yeah, I'm sorry, just
no, go ahead.
To piggyback on that, we never lose complete eyesight of either of our two murderers.
No, we don't.
Because basically, if you're the two people who have done something horrible and there are people around who may find it out, you never want to lose contact camera-wise with either of those two. And in case you don't know, dear audience, the premise of the film is it starts with a murder of two men murdering another man by strangling him with a rope, and then they put him in a large
it's a chest.
Yeah. And because they want to commit the perfect murder, and then they want to invite a bunch of people over who are in the same friend group as this guy, so that unbeknownst to them, they're in the room with the murder victim because they want to commit the perfect crime, but they also want to be very smug and assholes about it.
It's one of the most disturbing things about this particular movie is how nonchalant they are in just being like, yes, not only did we kill this person, but we're also going to have a party with the dead body there, and oh yeah, the dad of that person's going to be in there too, and his aunt, and the headmaster that they all knew. So it's like, and his girlfriend. So it's like all these people, and like all these conversations that are happening through this party. You're just like, there's a dead fucking body a foot away from you.
Yeah,
and they all know it except for the partygoers. Like the two psychopaths know it. And the whole movie itself is really how does that not necessarily guilt, but how does that fact affect these two individually? Because one person's getting off on it, the other person is literally suffering through the entire thing.
Yeah, it's the tension of it, and I don't remember the exact quote, and I'm sure that our dear listeners in Psychos Nation will correct me, that Hitchcock said the tension is not knowing whether or not there is a bomb, it's that there is a bomb, but when is it going to go off?
Yeah.
So, yeah, the idea that at any time anybody could be like, opening that chest, that's the continuous tension in there. But one thing I want to ask you is, now this is by, I call 1940s logic, which we didn't know shit in the 1940s, other than let's beat them Krauts and and fuck a bald eagle. I don't know, but
that's 1940s logic for you. Fuck a bald eagle. Okay,
it's like making love to America, Brian.
Oh, okay, sure.
But it's inferred in this movie that by the headmaster, who probably should have been their philosophy teacher, by the ideologies that he spouted, that they did this not because they were sociopaths or not because of some trauma they had in their lives, but because they were taught that certain human life doesn't matter. And do you agree with me that that is a fucked up message that against, in many ways, higher education, where it's you could be taught something that makes you go out and murder people?
So I'm glad you brought this up.
Yeah.
I thought we were going to wait to talk about this, but we can jump into it now. I think that message is, and honestly, a large chunk of this movie, for me at least, is a commentary on the death of Jews in World War II.
Oh,
that is
okay.
what I got out of it.
That went right over my head, please.
Okay, so here's the reason why. One, the things that are being talked about by Rupert, played by Jimmy Stewart, who's the former headmaster, and Brandon and Phillip, their ideology is the ideology that there are some people who are superior to other people, and that murdering them actually is a economic good. That is their thought process. Okay, that some people are lesser than others. Now, this also might be because of my own heritage and thought process on this. But for me, what I took that as is the ideology of eugenics, which is very popular in the 30s, very popular in the 40s, because Germany quite literally was doing that shit. The idea that there are some people who are lesser and some people that are superior is pulled straight from Nazi ideology. And they even mention Nietzsche and the whole Superman thing, or Übermensch, whatever it was. So like that is right there. That's German Nazi propaganda. Okay. And I think that they view that, hey, David Kentley is worth killing because he is a lesser person, that they are superior, just like Germans viewed Jewish people and other undesirables as lesser people, so it was okay to kill them. Okay, so I think that this is kind of a commentary on this. And Rupert has that same thinking up until the end, when it's thrust in his face. Quite literally how Germans, and I'd say a good chunk of a large portion of Americans, had that same belief up until the moment when they went to the concentration camps and saw the horrors of the Nazis. Now, that's a theory. You could say, Brian, that's a theory. But I also go with,
I think you're pretty spot on, but yeah.
1948. How many years removed are we from World War II?
3 years.
So that's probably fresh in people's minds. Nuremberg trials, I don't know if they've started yet. They probably have. 1948.
I think so.
Yeah. So like you're getting the aftermath of the discovery of what happened in Germany with the concentration camps. That's fresh in people's minds. And I think that this movie kind of is a commentary on that. That thinking that there are people who are lesser than you and that you can walk all over them and that you can murder them is the wrong way of thinking. And that, this is playing off of what happened in World War II.
I think you're spot on. And if we somehow still have a conservative audience member
whatever
existing,
if we still have a conservative audience member, I'm sure there's one who's like, one of these days, wait a minute, they talking about me? No, I mean,
these two don't want to make America great again. No, but I think of how a couple of these Trump wahoos like kidnapped or broken the home of Nancy Pelosi's husband and beat the ever living shit out of him.
Yeah,
and then the other conservatives just like laughed about it because it's almost, I mean, don't get me wrong, race, gender, sexuality are still the predominant things that are make people othered, but politics has become one too. It's like, oh well, Nancy Pelosi's husband doesn't deserve life. He's a liberal and his wife like runs the Democratic Party, like he deserves less than.
Yes.
So I think we're still seeing that.
Oh,
you know,
we
to
haven't
this day.
escaped that. If anything, it's gotten worse. It's gotten mainstream. That's the big problem that I see. And again, this is not a political show. Is that the messaging that's in Rope of everybody is a human, and that everyone deserves respect is lost because now it's become a tribe of, as you said, John. What political ideology do you ascribe to? And if you're in the wrong one, then you are less than human. That it's okay to break into your house. It's okay to, bum rush the Capitol because, well, the other party is in there and I don't like them.
Yeah, the big fat orange doofus told me to bum rush the Capitol. Yeah. But, as George Carlin once said, do you believe in God? No. Bang, you're dead.
Yeah.
It's like, do you believe in God? Yes. Do you believe in my God? No. Bang, you're dead. My God's got a bigger dick than your God. But this movie is very, very careful, and it's like, well, Jimmy Stewart, I can't remember his character's name.
Rupert.
It's like, who do you see as like undesirable people? And he's like, oh, jaywalkers and tap dancers or something. Like, it's just very innocuous things. He doesn't say like a race, a gender, a sexuality.
And again, it goes to
just things that annoy him.
Rupert is interesting because he's coming at the idea of murder from an intellectual side. And that's, I think, is one of the most dangerous sides of it. It's if you can ascribe some academic intellectual meaning to murder or horrible behavior, you legitimize it. And that's what he does when he's talking about how murder would solve things. Like, oh, well, we can just have a murder day. And I was telling Lauren, I'm like, this guy invented the fucking purge.
Yeah, I thought that too.
I'm like, this motherfucker invented the fucking purge. He's the purge father. So like, but that thinking is, I think, more dangerous because it legitimizes the belief. Yes, you could look at Philip and Brandon and go like, well, they actually acted out on it. Yeah, they did. But who was the one who put it in their head? Who was the one who did that? Who was the one who wrote books on it and talked about it at cocktail parties and spread it? It was Rupert.
Which, yeah, they have to go that route in the 40s because the idea of sociopathy is not a thing at this time. That whole discussion because, for those who are film historians, if you look to Psycho, they went, the studios were like, Hitch, how dare you make such a revolting story about such a creepy pervert? Yeah. And like these things don't exist as far as we know. Like this is smut. This is pornography. And now you look at Psycho. Like I show Psycho to a 10-year-old, mature 10-year-old, but a 10-year-old nonetheless. Like, is that it had to be that they were taught this because and again, we're not a political or sociological show, but the idea being that, well, my son only had sex with a man because he was manipulated or lied to or taken advantage of by some kind of cult. It can't be that my son is a homosexual. Somebody had to drive him to this. But that's 1940s thinking, So I do think that that's very interesting that it's like, oh, well, no, they had a professor who put this in their head and they went, okay, let's go kill people.
Now, one of the other themes that's in this that we talked obviously about, the whole, eugenics and Nazi, commentary on it. One of the other themes on this is about homosexuality, since you did bring it up.
Yes.
Do you see that as prevalent in this film?
I did see it, but in my research, I found out that I think the writer and both of the killers in the movie, so the three of them were homosexuals.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would have seen it otherwise if the performers weren't gay. But I did see that, and I do think that they're, and this is, I'm sure, fucking lost on the 1948 audience, kind of a homosexual subtext, which bothers me and the idea of that it continues the othering of homosexuality, especially in 1948. I'm sure the best years for gays ever.
Yeah, I mean, I when I saw that there was when looking at reviews of this and like looking at people who've really like done the deep dive on this film, and they've said that the characters of Brandon and Phillip are very much in a homosexual relationship. I didn't quite see it that way upon first viewing it, but when you do think about it, especially when they're having that conversation of like, what did you feel when you did the thing, when you did the murderings? And you've got Brandon who's like, it was exhilarating. And you've got Phillip who's saying like, I felt nothing. And you can kind of think that as like, Phillip
talking about sex.
Talk about sex. Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. Like that's that, or sex with someone who, like, I could see this as like Phillip's first time having a homosexual relationship.
And to equate homosexual love with murder.
Yes.
Yeah. Yikes. Yeah.
Yikes is right. But it's just that subtext. I can see it there when you really think about it. And yeah, it makes the two people who are in a homosexual relationship as the psychopathic killers, not helping the cause there.
Did you see the public domain video Boys Beware?
I did not know.
So this is a video, I think it's from either the late 50s or the early 60s, and it's teaching children how to look out for the dreaded homosexual.
Of course.
And of course, through the video, it's not that they're homosexual, it's because they're preying upon children. So this is the time and the belief that if you're homosexual, you're trying to have sex with kids.
Gross.
Because that's how you build, fear of the other. And there's one point where, a boy's picked up, like he's hitchhiking, and the guy takes him fishing, and the narrator goes, but what he doesn't know is, can't remember his name, but it's called Clarence. Like, Clarence has a sickness of the mind. A sickness where he wants boys. Clarence is a homosexual. And yeah, it just equates child molestation with homosexuality. It's funny if you don't cry when you watch it. And yeah, so the idea being like, oh, well, homosexuality is not something we understand and we're afraid of, so we have to other it that they're murderers or pedophiles or something. We need to make them a Dracula.
Yes.
Yeah. A modern day Dracula, So.
Yeah, but it's interesting how they weave that subtext, and obviously, like, I know that the writers were bisexual.
Yes, they were bisexual.
They were
yes,
bisexual,
yeah.
And I wonder if they knew that they were affixing that and making it a negative on when it comes to homosexual relationships. I don't know if they knew that. Hey fellas, quick heads up from the grooming front lines. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore. Thanks to our friends over at Manscaped and their Lawnmower 5.0, I got one right here, you can forget about nicking your bits. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe, so you can trim with confidence. Head over to manscaped.com and snag 20% off plus free shipping with the code CINEMA20. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming and no surprises. John, we've known each other for a long time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever sliced your balls?
Oh, all the time. I've got very sensitive nads. Let me just
sensitive
put it that
nads.
way. I try not to go down there too much because my balls end up looking like everybody who wasn't Harrison Ford in Witness. Just Amish nuts all the time.
I mean, for me, I have had problems where I literally have sliced down there and it looks like a horror show, and I don't want people's balls to look like a Cinnabites plaything. So we know that dudes get a little heebie-jeebies when it comes to going down there. And if you want to get a close shave, honestly, this guy right here, the Lawnmower 5.0, can do it for you. This 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little bit off the top. All right, John's got one right there. And a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. I use this one right here because I want to go smooth. With dual LED spotlights, you'll achieve better visibility, making every trim more precise and hassle-free.
You could even shave your balls in complete darkness now if you really wanted to, thanks to the LED light. Although I really don't recommend it, but you could.
He's right. Worried you'll make a mess? This bad boy is also waterproof. You can shave in the shower, in the bath, or in the ocean. I don't know why you would shave in the ocean, but guess what? You can. I love this thing because it does come in a compact case, making it really great for travel. Trust me, this trimmer will be your crown jewel's best buddy.
Brian, let me ask you something.
Sure.
Listeners to our podcast, or even viewers now, can they get some kind of special deal?
Oh, they can. You can get 20% off and free shipping with the code CINEMA20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code CINEMA20 at manscaped.com. Show your balls some love and feel free as a dove.
Well, I would say that Brandon comes off by societal stereotypical means more of the what you would think would be the underlying homosexual undertone than
They're
the other
just saying that
character.
because he's very this like
He's foppish.
he's very flamboyant, right?
Yeah.
Very pompous.
But I mean, that could just come off as like a rich New York arrogant
That's kind of
prick.
what I thought it as.
Yeah.
I thought it was like he's a rich New York asshole. Okay. I'm glad we're starting that because I do want to talk about these characters. So let's talk about Brandon. Okay. Brandon is the pure psychopathic killer in this.
Eric Harris.
He's Eric Harris. Yes, he's Eric Harris.
The other guy's Dylan Klebold, let's be honest.
No, the other guy's Dylan Cleveland. He's totally that. Not to trivialize Columbine, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah, whoops. Sorry.
whoops there, John. But yes, he 100% has bought in to the idea of murder, to the idea of murdering David Kentler, and doing it in a way that is sadistic and disturbing. Like, he doesn't just want to murder him; he wants to make him a altarpiece, if you will. And it's all about the overarching experience, like the not just the killing, but the how do we get away with it, and then how do we go ahead and celebrate it without anyone else knowing that we're doing this. And that's why he has the party. That's why he brings in his girlfriend, and that's why he brings in, you know, and tries to say like, oh, I'm gonna set up David's girlfriend with her ex, and it's like, this is fucking gross, dude. And they're literally eating off of his body.
Mm-hmm. It's like eating that, like the naked body that has a sushi on
Yes.
it, but it's a corpse.
But it's a corpse.
It reminds me very much of like thrill-seeking, like sexual people,
Yes.
where it's like, let's have sex in the changing room, but let's not lock the door because, ooh, like the fear of somebody walking in, is so tantalizing. The fact that they're like, let's put him in this box in the living room. Let's put the horse divorce on the table that he's in, and let's not lock it either. Like, oh, it's such a weird, sickening turn on that we could be caught at any minute. You know?
Well, I also get that he is a person of immense privilege.
Oh yeah.
Immense privilege. Like, this guy has never gotten a parking ticket.
When
let
you're-
alone been caught with any sort of thing.
When your principal's called the headmaster and you invite him to your parties, you're a child of privilege.
Yeah, I mean, granted, everyone at this party is a child of privilege. No one actually works for a living. Like I mean, outside of maybe Janet, like, she has a job, but she has, what's her job? Is writing for the magazine Allure. So it's not even like a real job.
It's like a Jeff Foxworthy thing in reverse. Like, if you call your principal the headmaster and invite him to your swank Manhattan parties, you might be privileged.
Yeah, but I mean, everyone in this party, outside of the only person who isn't is Mrs. Wilson. She's the only one who actually like works for a living. But everyone else, what?
Yeah. Ew. Works. Oh.
The maid works. Ew, gross.
She probably doesn't have 7 martinis a day at work.
No,
Ew.
no, she only has 2, and they're the leftover ones that no one drank.
Yeah, they were like half drank.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. but yeah, no one here actually has a real job. They're all stuck up New York assholes. But it's just interesting that Brandon is like the king of privilege, and that's, I think, what enables him to take these risks, is because his whole life has not been nothing but a risk that's always paid off.
But here's a problem I have with the movie.
Yeah.
Is that Brandon kind of comes off like Dr. Evil, where it's like,
yes, he literally is smoking like Dr. Evil looked. Like,
but the thing is, yeah. But he's like, or the woman's like, boy, I sure hope David's okay. And he's like, oh, I'm sure in a little while you won't have to worry about David. And it's like, dude, you're telegraphing it.
Oh, well, there are so many times that one, John Dall, who plays Brandon, it does an amazing job chewing up every bit of scenery in this movie. Like, outside of that scene, my favorite of him is when he's like, I'm going to get rid of the rope, and you see him go to the kitchen, and he's like a giddy schoolgirl with the rope as the kitchen door is swinging back and forth. Clearly there's some grip on the other side. He's swinging it to make sure it's fully open. But you see
that's
him,
the PA.
You see him holding the rope and just smiling like, ha, 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 and dropping it into a cabinet. And it's just, he's clearly having fun. But yes, he does come off like he's looking at the camera like, I'm going to get away with murder every time someone even mentions anything about David.
It's like Mel Brooks looking at the camera. Who? Me?
Or he just looks at the camera and goes, it's good to be the murderer.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Brandon is clearly the one who's leading the psychopathic charge here. But out with him is, of course, Phillip, who you're getting the feeling that Phillip, like, just kind of does what Brandon says out of fear and also morbid curiosity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's like when somebody has the bravery to bring up something that they know could horrifically backfire on them, that, yeah, he's the kind of guy that brings it up to him, like, without any hesitation, like, be like, hey, honey, do you want to have sex? Sure. Hey, but I had an idea. What if I pissed on your face? And it's like, oh, wow, you just fucking went all in, no hesitation. So I imagine this guy was kind of like, hey, it'd be fun if we didn't tell anybody and we murdered a motherfucker with a rope.
Yeah.
And he went,
okay.
And he went, oh, shit, that worked. Yeah.
Well, what I find hilarious is that in the first shot of this, Phillip's the one who's actually doing the strangling. It's not Brandon. It's Phillip.
Oh, Brandon's orchestrating it. Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon's orchestrated. He's done everything to kind of like lead up to it. But Phillip's the one who's actually like hands on the rope, pulling it tight, killing David.
Well, it's kind of like Vader doing the strangling in like New Hope when it's
Tarkin running him.
Tarkin running the show,
Yeah. But Phillip is a pianist, so he's really good with his hands.
Brian, watch your mouth.
It's an explicit podcast, dude. Like, I'll say, fuck, shit, crap.
Shit, piss, fuck, cunt, cocksucker, motherfucker, and tits.
Yeah, you got another George Carlin reference in there. But yeah, so Phillip is a pianist, so, he's very good with his hands, and apparently has a backstory of choking chickens, which is a thing.
He's very skilled at choking his chicken. I know.
Joking.
I know. I saw the movie too.
You saw the movie too? I'm just saying, like, there's a scene where he gets upset. He gets upset because it's inferred that he chokes a chicken, and he screams, "I never choked a chicken!" It's like, dude, you choke a chicken every night.
It's like, and that scene reminds me that if you already know that somebody who is guilty with you is very uncomfortable at a party, it's like, don't bring up the time that you fucked them in the ass and they pooped on your dick when they're already on edge. Like, maybe don't.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like, Brandon is such a fucking asshole, and he's such a psychopath that he believes that he can do all of these things, that he can have Phillip act like a nut job through the entire party and get away with it.
Do you think it's also his backup plan in case the body's found to frame Phillip as the
100%.
soul killer?
100%. I mean, halfway through the movie, I thought that Brandon was going to kill Phillip. Like, I thought that he was going to take him out. And because, like, clearly Phillip is not taking the murder well throughout this whole thing. He is constantly drinking. He is constantly on edge. He cuts his hand at one point because someone mentions David. As people are more and more like, hey, where's David at? We haven't heard from David. David's mom's called and hasn't heard from David. It's kind of unusual for him to not be here. Every moment that David's mentioned, Phillip sinks further and further into paranoia and acts it out in a way that anyone else who has half a brain would be like, that's kind of unusual that this person is acting out and drinking heavily and looking like a lush as we're talking about our friend David, who's not here and missing.
Yeah, and that's like movie speak.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, like, you know, if you're in a party, you're going to have multiple conversations, multiple side conversations, and like one guy getting drunk at a party isn't surprising, you know?
Yeah, but like it's in the sense that this guy is getting so bombed and you got to figure like, okay, yeah, these are New York, aristocrats. They don't get completely shit-faced.
Yeah, you don't show your hand.
No. Yeah. You have your 2 martinis and that's it. But like he's downing them, and then on top of that, just acting unusual and acting like a nervous wreck and screaming at people. And the only person who seems to notice is Jimmy Stewart, who we mentioned earlier.
Which I gotta say, for Jimmy, like, I looked up his IMDb, and he had done 3 films between It's a Wonderful Life and this.
Really?
But 2 of those 3 films came out the same year as Rope. So
okay,
there's 2 years between It's a Wonderful Life and Rope. For him to take this role, I remember that for American Psycho, the absolute hands down actor they wanted for that was Leonardo DiCaprio. And his like agent said, dude, you're the heartthrob from Titanic. Are you out of your fucking mind? You're not doing this movie. But for Jimmy Stewart to kind of play this role as, you know, a nihilistic misanthrope who accidentally leads 2 guys to kill each other like a year and a half after It's a Wonderful Life, that takes some balls.
It's unusual. Well, I think the other thing too to keep in mind, I think we mentioned this on one episode when we talked about It's a Wonderful Life, that that movie was not a blockbuster when it came out.
No, it wasn't. Yeah,
So,
it wasn't until years later.
Like, I can imagine that, you know, Jimmy Stewart's like, yeah, I did that It's a Wonderful Life movie. It didn't make any money. I don't really care. Maybe I'll go back to doing dramatic roles. And so, like, maybe that's the reason why he did Rope.
That's a really good point.
We're looking at it from the lens of, you're Jimmy Stewart. You're known for It's a Wonderful Life. And it's like, not yet.
Yeah. For those that don't know, Brian's spot on that It's a Wonderful Life was basically a bomb when it came out, and it was only ever a hit because it was so unsuccessful, and nobody wants to be running the switchboard at any network during the holidays. They found that they could preset it because they could buy It's a Wonderful Life for free to run like 10 times in a row at Christmas, kind of what we get now with the Christmas Story. And people found it that way, and it became an accidental cult Christmas classic where it was an absolute failure when it came out.
Yeah. So that's why I think why he's jumping from, you know, the Hallmark family film to hey, you just advocated for murder with 2 children. And years later, they go and they kill somebody. But what I found interesting was like, and maybe it's because like we watch Rear Window, and clearly in Rear Window, Jimmy Stewart's older, and in this one he's younger, but they made him look old.
Yeah.
And
throw a little gray in the temples.
They made him look really old, and it's not good makeup on him. It's just like, let's throw some gray shit in your hair, and I don't know, we'll take the sheen out of your skin, and that's it. And oh yeah, you're gonna have an attraction to Mrs. Wilson, who looks like she's 70. And he said he wants to marry Mrs. Wilson. He wants a piece of that.
Well, you're really good at taking care of the house.
You really like to go to that delicatessen. I saw you there.
Now, do you know how to make a ham and cheese sandwich? And do you
with lots of mayo? Because I a lot of mayo.
Speaking of mayo, do you swallow?
Oh my god! Oh my god! We're going to hell. Yeah, but Rupert is the only person who gets what the fuck is going on. He is the only one who knows that something's afoot, and it kind of becomes like a cat and mouse type thing, where we keep going like, is Rupert going to discover this? How soon before Rupert discovers it? And like the best part, and where like clearly, again, we going back to the editing style in this, is that the moment that Rupert knows what's going on, the camera cuts to him. And it's during that chicken choking scene where Philip is called out for murdering chickens. And of course, Philip sees it as, you're trying to pin the murder on me. I don't want to talk about it. So he defends himself. And when that happens, when that scream happens where Philip says, I never choked a chicken, it cuts right to Jimmy Stewart. And Jimmy Stewart's just looking like, what the fuck is going on here? And all we're getting there is the conversation's happening off screen, but we're looking at Jimmy Stewart's face, and we're getting that reaction of what is his face to the information that's being told to him. And we know that he is taking this in and going, yeah, there's something that's a bit more in this than what I'm used to seeing.
And I feel like you have to suspect that it's a narrative film, so it's you get whatever you need in terms of narrative, but like he has to have expected this from these two. They had to have been off before, or it'd be like, it would be a big bold leap if I was being like a little weird at like a Christmas party I had, Brian, you went, I think John killed a motherfucker and he's in the mini fridge.
Well, I don't know if it necessarily is that he thinks they killed anybody. I just think it's more or less he thinks they did something, and that something is the reason why David isn't there. Now, whether that is, hey, we kidnapped him, hey, we tied him up, put him in the closet somewhere, or hey, we drugged him. I don't think he's jumping immediately to these two assholes killed him, but I think it's more or less like these two assholes know where David is to some degree. But I don't think, because he has a history with them, I don't think he thinks like, yeah, they totally killed somebody.
Oh, they're like pranking David.
Yeah, I think they're more like pranking, because like all three of them grew up together in the same prep school. So like, that's kind of where my thought process is.
Okay. Yeah, no, yeah, I buy that a little bit more. That adds up a little bit more. But talk about the guilt that somebody like Jimmy Stewart has in this, where he's like, oh, well, maybe all that horrific nightmare teaching I've been doing to these kids isn't good for them.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's he totally, that's what I'm saying. Like, he totally is responsible for at least putting the idea in his head, in their heads that you can murder people. And his turn, of course, discovering the body is what gives him that, like, oh, wow, people do have worth thing that just hits him over the head.
Yeah, and it's a very almost, to use a word I've used like 10 times, so if you're playing the drinking game, a nihilistic ending where he realizes, oh, shit, in some way, this is my fault, and now I'm going to wait here for the police with them, not just so that they don't run, but also because even though I'm not going to be arrested for anything, like I'm waiting for the police for me because I'm partially responsible for this.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I was saying he is to some degree responsible for putting this idea in their heads. He's not without guilt.
And Brian, do you think that this film wasn't appreciated so much in its time? It became a cult classic because 1948 audiences weren't ready for heavy subject matter like this?
That's a good question. I think the reason why it wasn't appreciated for its time was because of how different it was in its style.
Mhm.
I think that in hindsight, we can appreciate the expressive long take that we see in Rope, and we can appreciate the fact that everything is told through dialogue. Yes, the camera's doing a lot of work in kind of showing us things, but it's not, a lot of the films that I think were coming out around that time really were using editing, traditional editing, to tell a story. So when you've got a movie like Rope, where it is nothing but a conversation happening for 2 hours, and it's all mostly in wide shot, and you've got 10 edits the entire time, and it's very long, very like everyone's talking, and that's it. Not a whole lot else action's going on. It can feel boring. And I mentioned at the top of the show, first time watching this before I watched it again with my wife, I fell asleep. Granted, I was watching it at like 10 o'clock at night, so that wasn't helping. But I fell asleep because that first 20 minutes is just, they murdered somebody. Let's just talk about stuff for 20 minutes.
If you were taking a dump for the first like 5 minutes of the movie and you came out, it would just be a bunch of people setting up for a party for 15, 20 minutes. Yeah.
And really the tension, it's just like with Rear Window, it's a slower burn. The tension does ratchet up. But it absolutely is a movie that you have to get through at least to the part where Rupert really gets that scene and they cut to him where he understands that something's going on. The minute we get to him, that is really where the action in this movie starts. And if you're lost before you get to that, you're not going to appreciate it. So like that's where I see it as. I think the structure of this thing is what hurt it. But because obviously film people are film people, we can appreciate it now for what it is.
Do you think, as kind of one of the last points I have on this, is this the textbook definition that Hitchcock is not an actor's director, that he is a DP's director? Because this movie is all about the camera, and I think that Hitchcock surrounds himself with what he hopes are good enough actors that he doesn't have to direct them at all, because I don't have a sense from the past two movies that we watched that he was doing too much legwork in directing the actors. I think he's more focused on his camera.
I think there is some truth to that, but that's not a bad thing. I think, and it's mostly because of the fact that I've experienced this with my own personal work and working with other people, that there are some directors out there who they can't let the actors actually do their craft. I think there are some directors who feel that the actor is really just a prop, and the prop has to do what I say, right? I'm of the belief, and I think Hitchcock is probably of this belief too, that the actor is a professional. And that actor is going to bring something to that scene based off of their own experiences and what they've gone through in their life and their interpretation of the character. So who am I to tell that trained professional how to interpret that character as they embody it? And that's probably the methodology. So if that's the case, where then it becomes, what are the things that I do have control over? The mise-en-scene, the cinematography, the color, the lighting, the sound, the set design, all of those things I have control over. So that's the things I'm going to focus on. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a different methodology. You could be like George Lucas, where you say louder, faster, more energy.
Yeah.
Or you could
once
be
again
like,
with feeling.
Yeah, once again with feeling. Or you could be like, yeah, you know what? What do you think about this character? You let the actor do the work. Now, one thing I will say is more than likely Hitchcock did have to choreograph everyone's movements.
Sure.
So everyone's blocking
There's a big
had to
difference.
have been pitch perfect on this thing.
There's a big difference for me between choreographing and character.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Is I really do believe that the actors were doing all of the work in this. That they were the ones who were look at this and go like, all right, well, how is this character going to come through? Now, obviously, Hitchcock is going to go through and see like, well, through the camera lens, I'm not seeing what you're doing, and giving notes. But I don't think he was like on their ass.
See, as a director, I've always been of the mindset of guide, don't tell.
Yeah.
If you tell them to do something, you're not helping them understand it. But if you can guide them to where they need to go and they have the eureka moment themselves, then that is where it's going to be. I was in a play where I was a man who was lost, basically suicidal. I kind of lost everything. And I meet a sociopath on a bridge who spends the entire play trying to convince me to jump off the bridge and kill myself. Mm-hmm. And I had, it was a play. I had an assistant director on it go, John, where are you right now? Because I think I just was tired during a rehearsal and I was kind of delivering the lines very monotone. He said, where are you right now? And I went, what do you mean? He's like in the show. And I'm like, I'm on this bridge. I'm suicidal. I don't really have anything to live for. And I'm desperately looking for my dog. And he's like, and who are you talking to? And he's like, a man that is manipulating me to kill myself. And I was like, oh, I can't forget that. I'm not just here to deliver the next line because I memorize it. I'm here to deliver the performance of a man who is at the end of his rope. Yeah. So, and I don't know if Hitch provides that for his actors. Like, I think he's the thinking man's Zack Snyder.
I mean, the other thing too, and we didn't mention this, is just that these actors probably also came from theater.
A lot of them, yeah.
So, like, you're getting theatrical performances. You're not getting film performances. There is a difference, and I think that's the difference becomes present when we look at his later works, where yes, some of those actors came from theater, but a lot of the younger faces started off in film. So there is a very different way that you show character in film versus theater. And I can see that in this one, everyone here is probably a theater actor. They've done the theater. They're used to that. Hey, act and, project as much as possible through your actions and your voice, and make sure the people in the back can hear you. That sort of acting style is more present in these earlier films than in his later works. So yeah. Good talk on this. We never really get to go into like deep film discussion.
Yeah.
Versus
it's
fart
nice.
Jokes. Fart jokes is fun.
We can still do this, but
a
deeply underrated Hitchcock film.
I'm glad my wife recommended it. I really am, because we were like, oh, well, we'll do Rope, and I'm like, oh, how's this gonna go? But I was pleasantly surprised, and I turned her afterwards. I was like, I understand why this is like one of your favorite films, because it is very much a intense film from start to finish. If you haven't seen it, go check it out. John, what'd you pay? Like $3 for it? Yeah, it's not
whatever.
Expensive.
It's worth $3.
It's worth $3. It says again, just like with Rear Window, one of those movies you can't really like watch your phone at the same time. It's a common theme with these movies that like they deserve your attention.
It's not like our 300th episode where like there are so many slow-mo battles, and maybe you can text your buddy Chip while these slow-mo battles are happening.
You're like, well, this slow-mo battle is only going to last for 3 minutes anyway. I've got time to, check my email.
Yeah.
Respond to a text. What's happening? Xerxes is getting shot in the face by a spear.
He's whipping a guy in the face with his giant dick.
yeah.
And then finishing him with his
shit.
6-pack. It's like a cheese grater. Just killing a guy with it.
Oh, shit. Well, with that said, John, where can they find you at on the internet?
Instagram, Facebook, and over at JDubs Video Nasties. I am this close for those that are watching. It's very close for those that are only listening to the audio. Finishing my Demolition Man video. And then, unfortunately, I'm going to have to watch Woody Allen's Manhattan again.
I'm sorry.
I'm finding it for free because I'm not giving that man any money for my next check-in on Woody Allen being a fucking pervert.
Nice. Well, of course, you can find us wherever you listen to podcasts. But I got to tell you, do me a favor. If you've really enjoyed, not just this discussion on the movie Rope or our previous discussion on Rear Window, but any of our podcast episodes, you listened to us in the past, you like what you hear, do me a favor. One, tell your friends about us. If you've got a friend who's into movies, who's into comedy, who likes this sort of thing, and is looking for a good podcast, share the episode with them. It does a lot for us. Outside of that, if you want to, go to cinemapsychoshow.com/follow and follow us on any podcast platform that you can find there. I've got little buttons to all of them up there. On top of that, if you're watching us on YouTube, do me a favor, hit the like, hit the subscribe, hit the bell so you never miss an episode. And with that said, we will see you next time.
I'm so glad you didn't know about the body lying on the floor. Oh.